and welcome to the Kitty Cat Lane. If you're an artist on the internet, there's a pretty good chance you've heard of the term same face syndrome, or maybe even cookie cutter characters. In case you haven't, I'll explain. The idea behind these terms is that whether you realize it or not, you have fallen into the habit of recreating the same expression or overall base design across your characters. If drawing your character the same way is what you like to do, or even how you make your money, then more power to you. Keep doing what works best for you. However, if you're trying to make character designs that stand out from each other, but you're afraid that your character's faces or designs are starting to blend together, I'm going to offer some advice and exercises to try and get out of that habit. So stick around if you're looking for ways to start changing up your character designs. When I first started making characters, I thought they all looked very different and unique from each other since their hair and clothing were drastically different. But looking back at them now, at their core, they all look pretty similar. I would always draw them facing the same direction, in basically the same pose, with a pretty neutral expression, and usually with the same body type. I would try to experiment a little with different styles for the eyes, but they still looked pretty samey. Even when I tried to experiment with different heights and weights to make my characters look a little more different, they barely looked any different from what they usually did. I was pretty self-conscious at the time, and I didn't want to step out of my comfort zone because I was afraid to try something new and to not do well at it. This left my art at a standstill for a while. I wasn't really improving, and I was getting burnt out of doing the same thing all the time. Shortly after that, I stopped drawing for years. Once I started getting back into art, I looked at my art more critically, and I started to notice how I would default to a lot of the same things. I wanted to get better, so I started to crack down on those areas that I wanted to improve on. Here are some areas you can focus on to try and break those habits of making the same characters and design choices over and over again. Let's start with facial features. Some things that you might really take for granted are noses, face shapes, and ears. I only knew how to draw one type of nose from one angle, and all of my faces had the same anime head shape with their hair usually hiding their ears. If that sounds kind of like you, to work on that, I'd suggest by starting with doodling a page of different head shapes, ears, and noses. Then start combining them at random, or with similar shapes, to create a whole new face that you might not have ever tried before. Once you have a pretty good grasp on changing up the facial features, then we can move on to facial expressions. Instead of drawing a plain face, then changing a few features, start to really stretch and exaggerate the whole face to convey the emotion that your character is supposed to be feeling. Look at yourself in a mirror and make that expression that you want to draw. Or watch an emotional scene from a show or movie and keep an eye out for the changes the face makes to express those really strong emotions. Sure, when you're drawing a character for the first time, or maybe even for a reference image, you might not want to show them expressing extreme anger or sadness over nothing. But if you know that this is a very stern character, you can draw their resting face a little more furrowed, or make them look a little more judgmental, so that when someone else looks at that character, they can already get an idea of what this character is going to be like without you having to explain their whole backstory. Now let's move on to expressive positions or body language. When you're drawing a character, think of their body as an extension to their facial expression. If I draw a super happy and playful character with a big open smile, but they're just standing there motionless like a mannequin with their arms to their side, it looks rather stiff and odd. A lot of people use their hands and arms when they talk, or at the very least, raise their shoulders or slump over, and so on. Make sure your pose matches your character's energy, even if you're just drawing a bust. Body types. Here's where I like to experiment the most. If I want to make a cast of characters, or I'm just doodling some cute girls in aesthetic clothing, like the art that I've been playing in the background, I like to try and give each character a different body type, or at least a noticeable height difference. This is especially helpful if you want to make a cast of characters that are each recognizable even from a distance, for, let's say, a comic, a game, or an animation. You can also use shape language when creating a character. Circles and rounded shapes are soft and gentle. Triangles are sharp and dangerous, and squares are sturdy and supportive. You can play around with these shapes to either reinforce the character's personality, or even throw off the vibe of the character for comedic or shocking effects. Some classic examples of twist character visual types are a huge, sharp, triangular-looking character who is actually really gentle and sensitive, despite their really big and intimidating body. Or a very cute, round, soft-looking character who looks really gentle, but is actually really mean or secretly the villain all along. If your art style is more realistic, you may not be able to play around with these funny shaped characters as much, but you can still use shape language in your character's outfit, for example. For the art in the background of this video, I challenged myself to draw 4 different girls that each had a different body type, aesthetic, and color palette to really make them stand out from each other. If I were making a proper cast of characters, or planned on further developing these girls into full characters with actual personalities, I would go back and try to make sure that they still had something that brought them together a little more. To do that, I could give them more of a matching aesthetic, but still keep some variety and style for individuality, or I could make their clothing's color palette a little less clashing. If you are making a cast of characters, it's a good idea to try drawing them together on the same page, even if it's just a quick little sketch, just to get an idea of what they look like together and make sure that if you want them to match, they still match, or if you want them to just look like they're from totally separate worlds, put them next to each other so you can make up as many clashing things as you can. To wrap things up, I'll just leave you with a little bit of information to keep in mind, and one last thing you can do to test your character designing skills. Show, don't tell. Ideally, you want your character's design to speak for themselves. Obviously, you won't be able to show their whole story just from looking at them, but add little details to their design that show off bits of their personality or interests. If you're comfortable sharing your art, I would highly recommend having a friend or family member take a look at your character and ask them what they think your character is like based on the design. Don't tell them anything about your character, just show them and ask what they think. What assumptions can they make based off of the context clues that you have on your character? If they make any correct assumptions, then that's great, you're doing a good job. If they're wrong, but that idea still works, you like it, you can just play into it and make that part of your character now. If they're really, really wrong and you don't see where they got that idea from, ask them to explain what and why they interpreted your character that way. Try not to get upset about it. Just genuinely ask them what made them think that. What they tell you can then help you see your character from an outside perspective and allow you to make the changes that you need to make to more effectively convey the character that you want them to be. If you found any of this advice to be informative or helpful, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for taking a walk down the kitty cat lane with me, and I hope you'll be back soon. Now it's time for the secret kitty of the day. Hello there, little kitty. Thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye!